Good morning. This is Just Listen, hosted by George Goodman. Today is June 15th, 2026. Welcome to the podcast. Okay, so hopefully everybody had a great weekend. Now, I want to continue with what I was talking about on Friday. What was I talking about? I was talking about the Illinois state budget of $56 billion. Okay, so here's what the Democratic message was. So the governor took a victory lap celebrating the passage of the record setting 55.9 billion state budget. And he highlighted key legislative victories from the spring sessions, including bans on junk fees, restriction on classroom cell phone use, and flat income and sales tax. All right, so they budgeted a record. So that's the first thing. So the Republican counter was they criticized the spending plan as irresponsible and unchecked growth of government. And so I'm going to get into the details of why the party thinks. So I'm talking about the candidate running for Republican nomination. And then I'm talking about what the Republican legislature, who are heavily in the minority in the Illinois legislature, said. Okay, so it's for fiscal year 2027. The good news is it maintains full pension contributions and increases funding for K 12 education. So that's kindergarten through 12th grade, higher education, healthcare initiatives, while aiming to improve overall affordability for working families without raising state income or sales taxes. Why? Because it's an election year. That's why. The midterms are in November. Okay, so here are how the details break down, and I won't bore you. I'm not going to read all of them. I just want you to know where your tax revenue is going. All right. Let's see. To balance the budget and fund new spending, the state expects to generate 800 million in new revenue through drumbeat, please, corporate taxes, extending limitations on corporate net operating loss deductions, targeted ad tax, a 10% tax on gross receipts of digital advertising services for companies with over a million in Illinois based revenue. That's pretty big. Digital assets, imposing taxes on digital assets like cryptocurrency transactions. Other fees, new taxes on social media companies and fantasy sports. Gas tax and sales tax, pause on planned state tax, gas tax, increases and extension on grocery tax suspensions at the state level. Remember, I said that grocery tax they suspended, but in your local municipalities, that didn't happen. So you're still getting taxed. You're just not getting taxed from the state. That's what the difference is in that. Spending priorities. Education fully funds the K 12 evidence based funding formula for public schools and provides targeted funding for early childhood initiatives. That's good. Special programs in healthcare includes allocations for safety net hospitals, SNAP administrative costs, and the Home Illinois program for reducing homelessness. Now, remember, I talked about SNAP because the federal government wasn't sure who was getting the entitlements. So federal government introduced an audit so that they would know who is getting the money. So if if any state actually goes over 6% in errors, meaning that they don't tell you who they gave it to or they gave it to the wrong people, then they have to pay the federal government, or the federal government decreases the amount that they get in SNAP. So that one, the federal government help them with, because it comes down to audits and who gets money in SNAP. All right. So here's why Illinois Republicans oppose the $56 billion state budget, because they say it introduces over 800 million in new tax revenues, including levies on digital advertising, cryptocurrency, and large social media companies. Okay, so that's not a great start for them. All right, key reasons: excessive spending. GOP lawmakers argue that the state's budget growth heavily outpaces household income and ignores the economic struggles of everyday taxpayers. Then they say new taxes on business. Republicans argue that the new corporate tax hikes, such an extending a cap on corporate operating losses and targeting digital assets, will stifle job creation, investment, and economic growth. So basically, they're saying on the new taxes on business is that when you tax businesses like this, they are going to have to cut costs somewhere. And where does that happen? Normally, it happens when they lay off employees to pad their expenses. So that's what they're talking about there. Immigration funding. Republicans heavily criticized the continued allocation of nearly 200 million for healthcare programs and welcome centers for non-citizens. That is huge, because that's why the funding for SNAP and some of the other social programs from the federal government shrunk, for that reason. So the state is funding them now. And so next fiscal year, we're going to see what the outcome of 55 billion with 800 million more in spending will do for the state, right? Because next year, the governor, the Democrat, may have won. Maybe they swept all of the state offices, and maybe they'll have a senator from the Democratic Party take over from the guy who just retired. All right. GOP leadership pointed to the state's lagging GDP growth and population loss, arguing that ever expanding state government gives residents and businesses more reasons to leave Illinois. My opinion, rare opinion, that fact is probably the most accurate. If you look at states like California, New York, even New Jersey, you see a mass exodus of people in these blue states because they are being heavily taxed. And so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So, what do you think? Is this a fair allocation of resources? I would say that you take care of the pensions, and to include teachers, state workers, etc., because the mismanagement from the elected officials doesn't mean that you punish people who have retired, who have worked in great faith. The other thing, too, is when you're talking about children that were dragged across the border, you have to take care of them. And as far as I know, no Republican has ever said that they would not get resources. So they are good to go. It doesn't include them, right? But it would include what the Republicans should have made sure is that people, grown-ups, 18 and over, who are in the country illegally. So, what do you think about the state budget in Illinois? All right. Please make comments, and we will see you again on Friday. So, have a great week. I'm always looking out for you. Please subscribe and share with others. This is Just Listen Live, hosted by George Goodman for Southern Illinois residents. Have a great day.